And we go to politics now. Raila out to destroy Jubilee, Ruto says, and that's also highlighted on both dailies. On the top strip of the Daily Nation, on the top strip of the Standard, it means even the dailies are not taking it as a simple matter. And Deputy President William Ruto yesterday, while in Mombasa, in the coastal area, this is what he said. Let's listen.
Sasa wale nataka niwaambie, hamuwezi kunifukuza ODM ati mkanifuata ati mnanifukuza Jubilee. Haiwezekani. Hiyo haiwezekani bwana. Porojo, fitina, tutavunja Jubilee. Watavunja Jubilee ya nani?
Yes, when it's coming from anyone else, we might take it as a simple matter, but when it's coming from the Deputy President himself, this is not a simple story, Joy. He's not the kind of person to just make such a claim that they are plotting to kick me out of Jubilee.
And you know, the thing with the Deputy President is he has history with Honorable Raila. So when he's talking like this, if you don't know where he's coming from, you think it's just a random statement. But if you followed his political career, you know that there is a time that they were together politically. And even you can say he went to the Hague on behalf of Raila, because remember that time it was, this one was on behalf of this side of the divide and this one was on behalf of this side of the divide. And that's how the Ruto relationship started. So you can tell this is coming, it's historical. It's not just a random statement coming out of nowhere. Maybe there is something that we are not privy to, that he is privy to, and that's why he's speaking like that. But in my opinion, he's never been a big fan of the handshake. He has tolerated it because that's what we have to deal with right now. But if it was up to him, I don't think the handshake would have happened. Yes. And so when he starts talking like this, you can tell maybe there is something with the handshake that is making him uncomfortable. I mean, if you're two in a bed and then there's somebody comes and lodges himself in between, you'd be like, you know what, I wasn't counting on a threesome. I was happy with the two of us. So maybe that's his discomfort.
But just even looking at his, just his demeanor, because he talks a lot in jest. He makes most of his statements sound light, even when they're heavy. But this one, he looked like he was really serious about it.
In fact, he looked very annoyed.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying. There most probably is something that we are not privy to that he is grappling with. But over and above that, since the handshake happened, there's been a mute. You know, when you see the first term of the Ruto president, of the Ruto administration, both of them were very, there was what we used to call the bromance between them. Yes. You could see everywhere they were together, there was a lot of camaraderie. And that seems to have muted quite a bit since March 9th. And so it would tell me that even the seeming cooling in relations may have a direct, it may be a direct consequence of what happened. And maybe that's where the Deputy President is feeling, look, I was here before you, this is actually my house, I have prepared, so let's take a ticket. Don't come and pretend that now you're more Jubilee than I am. Maybe that's what the message is trying to pass across.
And of course we might easily dismiss it as the usual politics that the Deputy President has always made Raila the punching bag, that Raila this, Raila that. But we've seen it build up. We've seen Murkomen, Duale making those statements here, and some of those headlines have just been hidden deep inside because now we're dealing with a lot of murder cases. But when you see the Deputy President coming out and making such a statement, and just looking at his body language, you can say he's not happy. Is it that time? Has it gotten there yet?
Well, first of all, I would say I want to agree with you that he was visibly annoyed. He's visibly irked, so there was really something eating him up. And if you actually read the story on, in the Standard or Nation, he seems to be responding to the headlines yesterday by Junet Mohammed that was implying that there were members of parliament that met at the DP's residence before this where Junet was actually saying they'll take disciplinary action against the members. Now, I'm not privy to that information by Junet Mohammed, so I cannot say whether it is correct or not, but I would want to presume that for Honorable Junet to say so, he probably has, unless it's politicking, he probably has some information. But having said that, I'd want to say that, you know, just for correction, Honorable Ruto didn't go to the Hague for Raila. As a matter of fact, I was in a meeting in that parliament where Honorable Raila tried everything to prevent Honorable Ruto from going to the Hague. And he insisted, with the first square master being then Honorable Isaac Ruto, saying, don't be vague, let's go to the Hague. Don't be vague, let's go to the Hague. So he actually took himself to the Hague. But it works well for his constituents or his followers to victimize Honorable Raila Odinga for supposedly taking him to the Hague. Again, he says he was chased from the party. To the best of my recollection, nobody chased him from the party. He left. But having said that, I would want to say that I was in parliament. I actually voted no. And I have the list of the members who voted no. And it makes
an interesting list.
It makes an interesting political read.
So you think
it makes an interesting political read. Yes.
Because there are claims that Jubilee was divided in this, that one side was pushing for the no. And once you get to that kind of division, you hear the president, the deputy president talking about utavunja Jubilee ya nani, when he is the one talking about kuvunjika kwa Jubilee, don't you think that that is a very telling statement? That anyone else should be talking about, yes, splits and all those things. But when he says himself, utavunja ya nani?
No, but you know, he's, like I said, he's talking from history. Honorable Raila, unfortunately, has had a checkered history where he enters into a party and it's Ambaratikas for some reason or other. If you start thinking about from when he was in Ford K, then LDP, then KANU, where the tractor swallowed the cock, or was it the cock that swallowed the tractor? Then there was the Rainbow Coalition. Then there is now there was initially CORD, what was before CORD? But he has had a history of political alliances that end in a big major split and a big major upset. And I think what Honorable Ruto is saying, similar fact evidence, when you enter somewhere, if you don't get what you want, you leave it asunder. And this one, you're not going to succeed. And I think that's the message he's trying to pass across. Now, when I look at Honorable Raila these days, I don't see so much coming from him. That's why I'm saying there must be something then happening under the radar that the rest of us are not privy to. But if I look at it overtly, he seems to be very happy to be supporting the government, to be telling people, let's move ahead with the government. But clearly there is something somewhere, because the allegation is he's using building bridges to do this, to break Jubilee. Now, again, building bridges does not seem to have been doing much. That tells me, therefore, there is undercurrents. There's something happening outside of our purview that maybe might become apparent in the next few days. But where we stand right now, we have no idea what's going on. But also at the same time, this threat, now that it's no longer veiled, it's actually an open confrontation. I think also is a strong message by the Deputy President that if you think I am leaving Jubilee, if you think I am planning something different, if you think I have a plan B, Jubilee is my plan A and it remains my plan A.
Talking about the politics and this very interesting list that you talk about, because that's not how it played out, at least publicly. Aden Duale, who's probably the biggest lieutenant to the Deputy President, was visibly pushing for yes. So when this accusation asks the Deputy President that much, what could be playing out?
What I can tell you is I'm fairly, if you see my stand of politics, I fairly stay true to a cause. And there were a number of members of parliament who were no. And I was out of the country, and when I came back, based on the information I was getting from my own constituency and the pressure I get from our constituency, I voted against, you know, the bill. And I took, and there were, you know, and there was actually a WhatsApp group that was set up. And that WhatsApp group had people across, do not be cheated. Yes. It had NASA and it had, you know, both NASA and Jubilee. It had everybody.
But because when you talk about Jubilee, we talk about those allied to the Deputy President.
There's TNA and URP, yes. Let's put it that way. Yeah, but what I can tell you is because of my strand of politics, I will leave it at that. But I can tell you that, you know, politics, a lot plays out, and everybody started at once. And then parties members were whipped. I think it's up to you as the media to find out that after the whipping, what was the reaction? What was the subsequent reaction? So I think that is something that you can find out. But having said that, I don't think it is Honorable Raila who is trying to rock a Jubilee from within. If you actually look at his strand of politics, you know, since last year, after the election, he actually went for the handshake despite even opposition from his own strongholds. Most people didn't want the handshake. I think that's something that's not in the public domain. Most people didn't want the handshake. But when the handshake came, you know, people decided to support him for purposes of, for the peace of the country and for the country to move forward.
Yes.
And so far things have gone fairly.
It's been an uneasy tolerance,
yes,
but it appears...
uneasy, but it had it's actually
but
enabled
it appears
the
it's
country.
coming to the end now because...
well, I wouldn't say that it's coming to the end. I would say that Honorable, the DP is uncomfortable, which again you are taking back to the same issue about history, that he's always had an uneasy relationship with Honorable Raila Odinga. And I think his uneasy relationship does not even primarily stem from what you are saying, Honorable Raila having the, you know, this, as you say, knack of rocking from within. I don't think that is something that you would only ascribe to Raila. If you look at almost all politicians, there are very few that will tell you that they belong to one party, including even DP Ruto himself from Kanu to his URP, having to ODM, to URP, to Jubilee. So every person has actually sort of been involved in more than one, because that's the nature of, you know, our politics. But having said that, I think I could trace it back to something Honorable Ruto said when he was still in ODM. And I noted it. He came to Mbita before I became member of parliament. I didn't attend. It was a fundraiser for a health facility in my constituency in Rusinga Island. And I was a fly on the wall. And I remember us talking about it with my colleagues, like, what did Honorable Ruto actually mean? And at that time, all of us knew that they were the closest of buddies with the Honorable Raila. But he said Honorable Raila is creating a traffic jam politically. Okay. And everybody was like, what did he mean? And that time, because they were pretty close, people didn't understand. So he's always seen Honorable Raila as creating a traffic jam for him, whether perceived or you know, or real. Okay. He's always seen Honorable Raila as creating, because he's overly ambitious, which may or may not be a bad thing. But in his over-ambition, he wants to be president now, here and now. And if you look like you are remotely a threat, then he will, you know, do everything and say everything and get ruffled because of...
because
so he, I think for me, he's just worried about what he does not know.
It's the worry now that's coming out visibly, because initially they dismissed the handshake as inconsequential. Raila Odinga's perceived ambitions of achieving or getting to the presidency beyond this year, they dismissed it. Now they appear a bit uncomfortable. What could have changed? Because now you're looking at the other side, James Orengo, a leader of minority in the Senate, now talking about the possibility of a Raila candidacy come 2022.
And this is the problem with Kenyan politics. We never stop. It's always in spin cycle. And for me, as a Kenyan now, it's actually very tiring.
Yes. Because
right now, already we are dealing with so much from government that we are not even thinking 2022. Right now we are thinking, how are you making it to next year without, because I was talking, someone was telling me most companies now are having cutbacks. People are not paying their bills. You deliver goods and people are having difficulty paying. The climate right now in the country is economic hardship. That's what people are dealing with. So when you get into politics, it's tiring, it's annoying. It's like, you know what, you guys are all two sides of the same coin. Whether it's you, you're not helping our lives. And I think what the tragedy with all this is that in the Jubilee equation, President Kenyatta now is just focused on legacy. He's trying to build his legacy. or destroy his legacy, whichever is happening right now. So him is dealing with legacy. But Honorable Ruto is thinking, I want Jubilee to stand because I have an ambition. I am seeing this as my vehicle in 2022. I don't want to start looking for a new car. And I want to carry this to 2022.
And the other threat to his ambitions is this other big discussion, to change the constitution or not. That is the question. Page 6 of the Standard, that's a headline. Jubilee at a crossroads over referendum calls. And this discussion is now coming up more and more. And they're talking about the possibility of reducing the number of elective seats.
They need to.
But now...
Reduce the commissions.
The reason for this referendum appears to keep shifting. It was to change the structure of government. Now it's to probably reduce the wage bill. Are we genuine about why we need a referendum?
Well, I would want, you know, if you actually listen to us as Kenyans, we keep shifting goalposts. When we moved this, when the Constitution was passed, the no's are now the ones who don't want to change. And they were saying, no, there's 20% of it that is bad. And we said, okay, why don't we pass it? And then look at how we deal with the 20%. So now the time has come several years later, and you don't want people to look at the 20%. Personally, what I would want to say is that if we wanted to do a constitution amendment, the time would be now. Beyond 1 year from now, we actually will have lost it. And there's a lot that needs to be changed in that constitution.
Is that the reason why we are now seeing this discussion getting headlines? Because previously, okay, fine, we were distracted by other issues, but now the issue about the referendum is becoming more and more a topical issue at many public fora.
And the referendum is one of those things that would divide us even further, in my opinion. I'm one of those who was a serious no proponent. So serious, I wore red.
Referendum.
I wore red for 6 months. For the 8 months until August, I wore red. And the problem with the constitution then is not what we're seeing trying to be addressed now. Because at the time, we talked about too many representatives. We talked about too many counties, too many constituencies, too many nominated people. That is part of what we are ticketing as no. But there was also the land question. That was part of what we talk about now. I'm part of the church, so we had the issue with having religious courts in the constitution. That was part of the no. There were other issues that we had brought out in the no. And now I'm not seeing those becoming part of the conversation. So if you tell me constitutional reform now, if it's being done for political expediency, I don't want it. I don't want to create more comfortable, cushy situations for the politicians to be happy that everybody is accommodated. As a Kenyan, I don't want that. If we are having a talk about changing the constitution, let's start with those who are saying no. What was wrong? What did you see as wrong with the... If that becomes part of the conversation, then maybe I can start saying, okay, fine, it's time for constitutional review. But if we're looking at it so that we can have a bigger executive of more than 2 people, if we are looking at solving the 2/3 question, if we're looking at reducing the number of commissions and representatives that we have, if we're looking at doing away some of the duplicity of government plus commissions plus departments in ministries, then that's the conversation I'm willing to have.
Yes, the fact that we are talking about this and these issues are coming out because the Kenyans really need to get to that point and understand what exactly are we looking to change?
Well, I would want to respond to one of the issues that you've raised. One, that at the point that there were the no team, you know, you raised a couple of issues, and which I'm sure are valid then and some are still valid now. And having said so, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So we've been eating the pudding. And what is the proof? The proof is that we found that some of these structures are not workable.
Exactly.
There are some things in the Constitution that are giving an unintended effect. Even now we are talking about seeking the Supreme Court interpretation of Article 115 that created the chaos in Parliament that we did not intend to have a president as a super legislature. So that, you know, for me, my own interpretation is that actually, to me, it's obvious. That's not what the article is very clear. But some lawyers are saying no. And if you look at our standing orders, it actually says the direct opposite. So sometimes to have, you know, for avoidance of doubt, you need to spell it out very clearly that what we actually mean, you know, in simple terms, is this constitutionally. So Once we have been eating, now we are able to tell where the shoe is actually pinching. But having said that, I also want sometimes to put a challenge, especially to the no team. I am the then no team. I am part of the church. I am a Christian, a practicing Christian. And one of the things I noticed the church was very concerned about then was the issue of international treaties. And I took it upon myself to deal with the issue that the church was uncomfortable with. And I brought what is called a Treaty Making and Ratification Act. And I called the church, sent documents, and nobody responded. And it almost made me feel that sometimes we also use the church politically. I'm sorry to say this, because then if the issue of treaties was such a big issue to the church, yet when I wanted to respond to that issue, and I sent it out, nobody, I think it's only one gentleman who came and gave his comment, and he was in a hurry, and he did not give in any substantive. I have passed, that law became, it became law a long time ago. I have never heard the church even comment about it. But it was one of the thorniest issues with the church. So sometimes the church, we also need to divorce ourselves a little from the politics of the day.
Do you think the reasons now we're giving, or we're discussing for which may necessitate a referendum are the real issues? Or do you think that some of these could actually just end up hiding the real problem that we should be looking at? This issue of overrepresentation, now it's coming out. A few weeks ago, it was about changing the governance structure, creating a prime minister's position and all these things. When you decide to go that route...
Can I just say something to that? I'd even forgotten, sorry. You know, one of the issues, again, in terms of our experiences, is that Kenya, every election cycle, we are having problems. How do you fix that problem? And I am not saying we must necessarily fix it by way of referendum, but if there's a way that we can fix it by way of referendum, then so be it. I want to give you an example. There was a day we were in Parliament just after the elections. You know, a lot of people don't realize that politicians are also human beings. We get traumatized. We don't like the things we see. I don't like seeing people being killed every 5 years. It's not nice. I don't like kids being shot at and killed, you know. And I remember when I was speaking to it, I actually cried in Parliament. I made, even Kinadwale and others, people cried in Parliament. Because I don't like it. As a human being, I don't like what I see every 5 years. Is there a way we can fix it? If it requires a constitutional amendment, I'm okay with it. If we can fix the problem that makes Kenyans kill each other, whether we call it political expediency or whatever, if it can reduce the level of tension and the killings and all that, I'd be very happy to support it personally.
This would necessitate a sort of a conference, probably like the Bomas conference, because the kind of discussions we're having, probably if we leave it just to the politicians to talk at public rallies, they will focus more on issues of representation and probably governance structures, and forget about some of the other issues that we should be looking at. And probably that's where, as a public, we get lost. Do we really need a referendum? If you ask any man on the streets, they do not. Why? Why do we need it?
I'd be very wary of that sort of proposition. Remember, think back to when we started talking about constitutional review. We started with actually a constitutional review. We're supposed to look at the constitution we had and see how we could improve it. But the process got hijacked. It got hijacked by people with interests, people with needing influence, people with causes, and they saw that this was a chance for us to legislate. And I remember now we formed women caucuses, and we had civil society, and we had politicos, and we had, everybody had we had the church. Everybody who had an interest in this situation just found the niche and all latched on to the Bomas process. And so Bomas became battering. It became, if we get this, then you get this, and we get this, and we get this. And what we ended up with is a document which, in my opinion, covered plenty of interests, but did not capture the heart of the simple Mwananchi. One of the greatest criticisms I've had about this constitution is that we put too much detail in it. And that's why it muddles us. Because it became constitution, but it became enabling statutes rolled in one. So you say, for example, one of our pet peeves as church, Everybody has a right to life. We didn't leave the right to life in the Constitution and let Parliament legislate on what this right to life will look like. We went ahead to break it down and say, this is how the right to life will look like. We decided, okay, we're going to form a National Land Commission. But we didn't just leave it at that. We went ahead to break down and give them duties and responsibilities that were duplicating things that were already being done. In my opinion, if we're going to have a constitutional review, first and foremost, it has to be from a place of patriotism. We drafted the constitution basically to try and get Moism out of our system. We were drafting our constitution to make sure we never had another Moi. Somebody couldn't sit in power for another 27 years. Now, when you draft a document with a person in mind, and when that person is no longer a factor, you're left holding something that now is no longer fit for purpose. So I think we need to come to a place where...
risk because we're talking about individuals here.
Exactly, where patriotism has to be what is driving this. Let's write a document.
Do you think the common
for
Kenyan
posterity
really feels the need for a referendum at this point?
Many of them, if you tell them, it will reduce their burden, because the burden is heavy. It's like the days of Solomon, where you're telling them, they're telling the children of Israel, they're telling Solomon's son, oh, your father gave us heavy taxes, please ease the burden. And told them, you think my father's was heavy? You will think my father's was something you would lift the little finger. Let me show you taxes. And the Kenyans are under that weight now. So if you tell them it's going to make their burden easier, they'll run for referendum. But in my opinion, if it is not driven by patriotism, if you're not writing a document for posterity, if we are still doing this barter trade, horse trading, we'd rather even live with what we have until we are more sober as a society.
Final comment, it's politicians who are driving this discussion right now. Should we allow them to do that? Because
of course. The reason why you should allow politicians to drive this is because if I wanted to, make a dress, I will go to a designer. I will not go to a driver. and half of the constitution is about political interests. So for them, and going back to the issue we're talking about, Moi, we didn't do a constitution to take away Moi and his influence. We did a constitution. It wasn't necessarily about Moi, but it was about a bad past. Unfortunately, it just so happened that other than the late Kenyatta, who, died so long ago, people can hardly remember. The longest serving president we had then was Moi. So it was just a historical issue, nothing really about, personal about Moi. And for me, if you look at the reason why Kenyans were that detailed in the constitution, usually when you see people that detailed is because they don't have faith in the institutions and systems and the ability to understand the principles that are enacted. And until we build that culture, until we inculcate a culture and a vision, and the values that we are talking about in Article 10, then people want it spelled, in prose, not in principles. And until we reach there, and I'm sure from even the headlines you are seeing, people being killed, we don't care about life, we don't care about values, then we must put it in prose. We must say, the law that we intended is XYZ. But having said that, Kenyans need burdens reduced. But Kenyans need peace. I want to remember this girl who spoke to me after, the handshake at the toilet at the Intercontinental. I remember she's a Kikuyu, I forget her name. And she hung on to my hand. I wanted to leave because I was rushing and she refused. And she said, Millie, I don't have anything personal against Raila Odinga. Please, please, make this handshake work. My business has closed. I can't send my kids to school. Kenyans also want peace. They don't want people being killed. They don't want this madness we see during elections. I hate it with a passion. If we can fix it constitutionally, I'd be happy.
Are you comfortable leaving it to the politicians to drive this conversation?
No, because our politicians have proven that they can be selfish if they have to. And I would rather, even if the politicians have to be involved, because the law has to be passed on the floor of the House, but we must, as citizens, also rise up and tell them, you know what, this is the script, read from it. We've seen they're able to read from their script when they want to. And if government wants to force something through, they force it. But time has come, if we say that power rests supremely with the people, let it rest supremely with the people. Because if we don't do that, then there'll come a time when the poor have got nothing else left to eat. They will eat the rich. They'll come after the politicos and tell them, you will try to go to your constituency and they'll be like, oh, that is the source of our problem. And you become a representative of all the hate and all the anger. We need to diffuse it while we still can.
to change the constitution or not? That's a question, and that's how the headline reads on page 6 of the Standard today. What exactly are we talking about? What is the main issue that we want to change in this constitution? Is it something you really understand, or is it what the politicians are saying? Thank you so much, Joe Mdivo, lawyer, social political commentator, and Millie Odhiambo, a lawyer also, and MP Suba North, for this very informed conversation today. Quite some legal advice. Even I feel advised. Thank you so much for that. Let's